everybody, Adam from Gunworks. We're going to talk about case gauging ammo today, and the moral of the story at the end of the day is make sure your case gauge is tighter than your barrel. So I'm going to give you some examples and talk about how the cases work, but if you just need the details, make sure that this is tighter than this. So how do we do that? That's the question, right? So I'm just going to case gauge a bunch of rounds here I picked out early beforehand, and you're starting to see that some of these rounds won't even go all the way into my case gauge. So this one's super tight. Let's start there. This one's loose. This is what we want. So I want to be able to flip over my case gauge and they just drop right out. But this one's ultra tight. So I'm going to push this one out. So in the case gauge, it went all the way in and it was flush, but it was super tight. And I want to see if that, and I don't do it with a super clean barrel either because I want to know if it's going to work when the gun's a little dirty. So that passes. So that's starting to indicate to me that this is tighter than this, which is what we want. That's good. Be careful. I think it's Dillon and Wilson. A couple of them have these single case gauges that are way blown out, way bigger than any chamber would be. So now I'm going to look at this one. I can't even push this case all the way in. So take that out, stick it in my barrel, and it sticks, but barely. So will this run in the gun under spring pressure? Probably. I'm almost certain. Where this might get you is if you have a magazine problem where the magazine just happens to that time put the bullet a little lower in the ramp, and then it comes up and you've lost some momentum here, energy, right? And it's coming into the thing, and that little bit. But again, this one, you know, it works. So my rule of thumb for this case gauge with this barrel setup is that if I can push them flat, they're going to work, right? So I could push all of these flat except this one. So again, this is the worst in the bunch. I'll check it. Drops free. So we're looking good there. Now the ones I can push flat, even though they're tight, they should go good. Yep, and they do. So this is what we need to know about kind of what's going on. Now a couple other things to keep in mind. You see I've marked a bunch of these up with a blue marker. So every gun guy should have a big fat blue Sharpie, and that allows you to put a lot of blue Sharpie on something. And that's what we use to see where they're sticking. So these cases have a little rim in here where they're blown out. They were shot in an unsupported chamber. And we rolled these. Everything that we do gets rolled before it gets reloaded. But still, there's just a little bit of a high spot here for the case gauge. We like the hundo case gauges. They seem to be tight. So, just in comparison, here's a factory new round, right? There's like 0 resistance. This is the correct spec. Boom, boom, boom. Alright, so we really want this out of our reloaded ammo, but it's really hard to get. And the answer, or the problem ends up being, and again, it's not a bad idea to have a halfway cutaway case here, but we need a supported chamber. So whenever we fire form, or every time we fire a round in here, we fire form. So this case expands to exactly the diameter in here. And so if, it's going to be hard to see on the camera, but this chamber for us fully supported. So the thick part of the case here is always covered, and you're never ever exposing this thinner part. So if the chamber was exposed up to, you know, this cutaway part here where it gets much thinner, then that's going to stretch out. That's what you're seeing. That's what the bulge cases are, is this stretching out to the bottom of this. Now, how does that play into what we're talking about now, and the reason I marked some of them up? Some of them are bulged. This one, in fact, it bulged on this bottom side, but not the top. So they will fit in the chamber differently if you rotate them. So I've had guys say, oh, you know, I went back and checked all my rounds and they cleared the second time. Well, there'll be a spot where this kind of hangs up. Again, that round will work, but we're always looking for that bulge, and if you're not pre-rolling the cases, the chances are that bulge is worse in some spots than others. But there's a couple of options. One is to always have, the system here is simply have the tighter case gauge than your chamber, but there's different chamber diameters that we can ream to, and so we try it here at Atlas Gunworks to be right in the middle. If you're too big when you fire, you're going to case fire form all those cases. They'll be too big. You won't be able to resize them. You'll essentially wreck every piece of brass. So it's important to get a system, and then my system with this is simply this. If I can push them flat, even if I have to push on them a little bit, then they're good. This one I can't push flat. I'm going to put this in a maybe bin. I won't shoot that at a match or even at practice. Now here's my theory. Depends on if you're retired or your timeline, but even in today's world, somebody who's retired, probably your time is more valuable than that 20-cent round. So I just make sure that whenever I'm doing something I care about, if you practice intently, like we do, then redoing a run or stopping halfway or not getting data from some skill or drill that you're working on isn't worth jacking around out of the gun. So everything I do gets case gauged. Everything needs to at least be press fit in these shock bottle gauges for us, the hundos. But just work out your own system. Every now and then, make sure you check your barrel to your case gauge, and that will solve 99% of your bulge brass problems. I hope that was helpful. We'll see you on the range soon.